Are we ready?
Yeah.
All right.
This is Vinod's AI note taker.
All right. Vinod.
Sharon, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
It's been such a long time.
all 5 minutes. How are you feeling?
It's been 15.
How are you feeling about this conversation? We're about to launch big things, talk about real hefty numbers and cool things.
Can we get right into the methodology? It's my favorite part.
Oh my god. After my own heart, let's do it. So if I throw some big questions at you, you'll be okay.
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay. Well, I can start easy, nice and easy.
Yeah, let's start easy.
Okay. So tell me about how this project came to be. Where did the idea come from? What is the inception?
There are so many starting points for this project. And it's one of those projects that, you can't quite pinpoint an origin story for.
Mm-hmm.
But I do vividly remember Gabe Oatley, who is our philanthropy reporter at Future of Good.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done some phenomenal reporting on
Yes.
big shifts that are happening in the philanthropic and funding landscape. He came to me and said, Vinod, we should do a story on the history of institutional philanthropy in Canada. And there's been lots of highlights, there's been lots of lowlights, but let's take a comprehensive look at the history of institutional philanthropy. And as we were sort of getting into the story and unpacking the last, 100 ish years of institutional philanthropy in this country, which includes corporate foundations, community foundations, family foundations, and others, we realized there are teams that are doing some really, really exceptional work when it comes to being thoughtful about equity and inclusion and justice. And then there are other teams who are very much in a, learning, being thoughtful about equity and inclusion and justice. And then there are other teams who are very much in a, learning journey, right? And only in the last sort of, 20, 30, 40 years or so have just started to think about what does this mean for the work we do, right? But that story and the sort of the journey of that story that Gabe worked on, I would say was a pivotal starting point for us to think about what if we really jumped into this and explored what does it look like to lead with equity? I think that was sort of the moment where we said, we have to talk to Sharon.
Okay, so is this the part in the Netflix special where you're gonna be like, gotta make a call, this is happening?
I have to make a call. I didn't make a call.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the beginning.
That was the beginning.
All right, and we're here now.
And we're here now.
Okay.
So what compelled you to work on this?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had a... See, again, your scene in the Netflix special is going to be like, you're like, journalists, let's talk about this. We have a story. Mine may be a little less exciting. Maybe it won't make the first cut, but social service organizations, the nonprofits and the foundations that fund them, they've had a pretty significant impact on my personal life, right? So when I came to Canada, I was alone. I was 18 years old. I was a student and I was an immigrant. And the organizations that foundations keep alive, they're not abstract ideas. This was the way I was figuring out how to navigate my life here as a young person. This was, unfortunately, occasional visits to the food bank. And so this idea of, okay, well, in a time when these organizations are so chronically underfunded across the country, the gap between the need and how well the need is being met, I think funding organizations, grant makers, They are our best, and they will continue to be our best option for meeting that need. And, I am one of those people who has had the need that has been met. So when, the opportunity came to say, okay, well, let's look at who to celebrate. Let's look at who's doing things well. Let's look at the effect it's having, both for the people who are on the other side of these grants, and even further along, the people who benefit from where this money is being dispersed. I mean, it was a no-brainer. Now that you know how I'm here, I'm curious to know, when we got into the thick of things, you've had your big kind of aha moment. You said, okay, let's assemble a team, Avengers assemble. And, thankfully I'm one of those. Down the road, what was surprising? What brought up like, oh my goodness, I did not see this coming?
A big thing that surprised me was when you look across the top 50 list, it's a fairly even split between community foundations and family foundations.
Yeah.
And there's a number of corporate foundations in there as well, but a fairly even split between community foundations and family foundations. That surprised me. And it just goes to show that there is, all kinds of funders are leading with equity. And it's going to be really interesting to look behind the data of which metrics are family foundations perhaps leading in, and which metrics are perhaps community foundations leading in.
Yeah. Okay. I will say that was surprising too, because you make a lot of assumptions about like, okay, who's going to be doing this well?
Right. What surprised you?
I think, again, not to sound like a broken record, going back to methodology, when you're building something new, this, speaking of social justice frameworks and ideas, when you are creating something new, when you're putting language to something, it's really important that you start by assuming just because I'm putting language to a thing, just because I'm articulating a thing, doesn't mean I am creating it. Right? And so even though we were saying this is what it means to be an equitable funder, we were creating all these metrics and indicators for what that means. Even though I know that, I was still surprised to see that although we were, again, not creating something new, just the process of saying, okay, well, who's meeting this indicator that we've developed, it was really surprising to see that there are foundations that are killing it. And they don't know that because we are introducing this language. We are introducing methodology. We're introducing these metrics. But then when you step away and you say, you didn't even have the language for this. You didn't even say we're, aspiring to be the most equitable funder. And when we as an external party look at it and actually put in time and effort and research into it, we're like, yeah, that's what you're doing and you're doing it really well. So that was really surprising, which unfortunately should not have surprised me, but here we are.
So Sharon, you folks are experts in all kinds of different aspects of diversity, equity, inclusion, justice. How does this project fit into the broader work that you're doing?
Yeah, I like that question because I think there's a traditional understanding about what people like me do, which is, and it's sort of crassly, we walk into a room, we make you feel bad, and then we say best of luck, listen and learn. But I really pride myself on the fact that at QuakeLab, we like to focus on systems and systems change, because we know at the end of the day, the thing that either makes or break everyday life for the most marginalized is the way they have to navigate through a lot of these systems. And when we're talking about funders and grant makers, they're this sort of like quiet part of a really massive and a really critical system in Canada. And so, stay with me here for a second. I'm going to take you down my thinking, okay? So you have this massive portion of the charity kind of like institution, or the charity beast in Canada, right? And the way at its sort of simplest definition that we think of charity, even the way that the CRA, let's say, defines a charity, one of the top things is alleviation of poverty. And then you start looking at who is experiencing poverty in Canada. And you start seeing the numbers, and they're pretty stark. We know that Indigenous youth and older people, and Black youth and older people, are using food banks at disproportionate rates. We know that racialized families, I think, are double, I think the stats from 2021 are double as likely to experience poverty or to live below the poverty line. We know, who's most likely to experience housing insecurity. We know that queer and trans youth are more likely to be homeless. So when we're seeing that the most marginalized populations are more likely to experience poverty at disproportionate rates, and then we're saying that these funders, they are responsible in some capacity in this giant mechanism to alleviate that poverty, then figuring out how equitable they are, figuring out actually not just how equitable, but what we were able to do, which is define what it means to be equitable, to create these markers, to create these indicators. At its core, I think that might be one of the best assessments for how successful we are at doing what we say we're doing, and also where we can change. Because at the end of the day, the people who are most going to benefit are the people who are already most marginalized, and that's where I live for work, trying to figure out how the most marginalized people are having to navigate all of these systems that we all take for granted. And so this, I think it was just a perfect tie into what we do and the way we think and the way we emphasize data and disaggregated data, and the way we emphasize the idea of words mean things, and we need to be able to properly articulate and define something like equity, so that when we do go to foundations and say, okay, let's see what you're doing, we're not left just thinking about what we call aesthetic diversity, which is it's like have you ever seen university like brochures and prospectus?
Yes.
And they're sitting around a tree. You got your Black kid, you got your this kid, they're playing guitar. We're not interested in looking at like the who's here. It's more transparency. How easy is it to get those monies that you're dispersing? What's the process? What are you investing in? Those are critical questions. And so the idea of where does DEI fit in that? Dare I say, we are at the center. And so it made sense for us to be a part of that. And I think it also made sense for us to be able to work together on this, because you're kind of at the forefront of that everyday reporting, everyday investigating of like, what is the social service sector? What is the social goods sector doing? Where are our gaps? And being able to work together to identify those gaps was really critical. But, also the same way, we had a conversation right at the very beginning, and I said to you, okay, what's the angle here? And you said, we want to celebrate. We want to celebrate the foundations that are doing excellently. And it's stuck with me for this 100 billion years that we've been doing this. And it's acted as kind of our North Star. And I want you to tell me more about why that was such an easy and important aspect of what we were doing. Why celebrate?
Right. You're right. This is the best ranking in the world. For all the reasons that you mentioned, it often feels like funders have this responsibility. And because of that, there's way more critique of the work that they do than there is a celebration of the thoughtfulness that they put into their work. And there's no shortage of critiques, But when you look across the country, there's very few ways that funders are celebrated for the thoughtful work that they do in advancing equity, centering equity in their grant making and in their investing. And in the vast landscape of 8,000 plus foundations, let's introduce some celebration. And with celebration also, comes a lot of really interesting, how come that person got that done so fast? Or how did they do that well? How did they come up with a DEI strategy for their investing? Right? So all these kinds of things start to bubble up.
Yeah.
And those are all, in my view, you mentioned systems change. Those are all tipping points for systems change over time. And so, we start with looking at the largest grant makers by asset size across the country and introducing some evidence and analysis on who's leading with equity and how are they leading with equity. And we celebrate. And then that is for everyone else to sort of look at. You may not be one of the largest grant makers in the country, but this matters. And they can look at how do they do this? They're operating in the same region as we are, or they might be operating or supporting a very similar cause as we are. How do they do this? And hopefully, we're hoping that all of that will, spark conversations within their team, which will then spark some actions that then will get them to go, let's improve the way we work.
Okay.
And so that's what celebration does. It introduces a space of possibility and positivity that enables people and empowers people to take positive and good action.
So it's almost like we set the ceiling. We're like, that's the ceiling, but also this is how you get there. And also this is who's, sitting pretty up on that ceiling.
Right.
There's always room, but like, it's possible, it's doable. This is how, and let's get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All these funders can, if they want to, they can look at who's leading across each of the metrics. Right. And then they can start to, reflect on, well, how can we get there as a team? How can we improve our practices? Have more folks with lived experience in our granting committees or on our boards or investment committees? How can we shorten the time between, when folks submit a grant application and when we approve and the capital is dispersed? All of these things.
And these are very real indicators.
These are very
This is what
real
we're saying.
indicators.
This is what equitable funding looks like, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Sharon, how did you come up with the definition for what is an equitable funder?
Yeah, that probably was my favorite part because as a team, we're big methodology nerds. And so it was important that we get it right. We could have gone in the direction of trying to make it like a numbers game. Like, how diverse are you? Who's on your board? Who's on your staff? But we really wanted to make sure that the sort of anchor to the project would be grounded in academic research, would be grounded in social justice frameworks, theory, and sort of ideas, so that we could feel really good about the pillars that were essentially holding up the entirety of the project, which is ideas like transparency, and where investments were going, how monies were being dispersed. This was really, really crucial to ensuring that our methodology was strong.
Amazing. So great to work with you. We're going to do this again, right?
I think give me like 4 to 6 hours to get breakfast in me, and then I'm ready to go again. What are we doing next? Most equitable what?
Oh, this is going to be a good one. Yeah, it feels like we should take this to government funders. That will be a whole other, that will be very interesting.
I mean, I was going to stress you out and say, let's say most equitable publications. Let's go. No conflict of interest.
I'll have to be out for that one.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, this was
a pleasure.
Lovely to chat. Thanks.